Chris Evans made Steve Rogers an iconic part of modern pop culture, but there's something special about Steve that makes him so compelling. He's not just a superhero, he's a symbol. He's a man out of time, and he's been through war, loss, and grief. He's seen everything a soldier can, but never gave up. So today we're honoring his legacy by picking 10 quotes that perfectly sum up his character arc in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Starting with number 10, "I'm with you till the end of the line, pal." This quote goes way back to the very first Captain America movie, and that's when Bucky promises Steve that he's going to stick with him till the end of the line after his mother's funeral. We know the two have been friends since they were kids, but this quote tells you so much about their relationship, especially when it's tested in The Winter Soldier. When Steve refuses to fight Bucky near the end, he gets beaten senseless by his brainwashed best friend. Steve repeats the quote to him, ready to die, just so Bucky could snap out of it. But if you think about it, the quote is a part of his core belief system. He's made a lot of friends throughout his time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, from Tony Stark to Thor to Sam Wilson and T'Challa, and he'd be with them till the end of the line too. Coming in at number 9 is "Everything special about you came out of a bottle." Steve and Tony Stark had a strained working relationship in the beginning of the Avengers, to say the least. To Tony, Steve was the product of an experiment from the 40s and was just too squeaky clean. So at the time, Tony couldn't see what was so special about the Captain at all.
A hero? Like you? You're a laboratory experiment, Rogers. Everything special about you came out of a bottle.
The man's superhero physique, his strength, and stamina all came from Dr. Erskine's experiment. But over the next few movies, Tony realized his uniqueness isn't his abilities, it's his unbeatable willpower and sense of righteousness. The man's incorruptible no matter how much power you put before him, and he continues winning Tony's respect long after their first encounter, with the two becoming best friends in the process. At number 8, it's Steve looking at his own and saying, "That is America's." Trust us, this one is really important for Cap's character development. Steve is always the serious, stoic character of any group he's in. Even though he's in the modern world, he's still a 100-year-old guy from the 40s. Remember when he said language in Age of Ultron? Everyone clowned him for it, and that just proves our point. But he's willing to change and shows a more humorous side of himself in future movies, especially in Endgame, where he fights the 2012 version of himself. He wins the fight, gets up, checks out his own and accepts that it is America's. The 2012 version of Steve would have never said that, and that's growth. It's also a great message about self-acceptance, Own your people. Up next is number 7, "My faith is in people, I guess individuals." Throughout Civil War, Steve and Tony Stark lock horns on the Sokovia Accord, with Tony siding with Thunderbolt Ross and accepting that the Avengers need to be put in check. But Steve values free will above, and the Sokovia Accords means giving up his right to choose which cause he wants to fight for. At the end of the movie, he leaves Tony a note and explains the reasons for his choices. He's never going to be able to trust institutions with an agenda. Whether it's a government agency, SHIELD, or his experience with Hydra both in World War II and the modern era, he's been burned by the same institutions way too many times to be able to trust another one. Steve values friendship in individual people a lot more than a collection of suits, because real friends don't stab you in the back, even if they're brainwashed by Hydra. Now for number 6, Ultron saying, "Captain America pretending you could live without a war." One thing Age of Ultron got right was Steve's character arc. Right after Ultron becomes self-aware, he confronts the Avengers at the Avengers Tower. He analyzes all of them and calls Steve God's righteous man, and the genocidal maniac isn't wrong for once. If you look at the Cap's history, he's got war written all over it. He'd love nothing more than to build a normal life, but he's pulled into the battlefield like Elon Musk to controversy. Cap's one of the most morally upright heroes in Marvel Comics, but Ultron was right when he said that he can't live without a war.
Captain America, God's righteous man, pretending you could live without a war.
But that's the thing, even though he does go to war, it's against those who'd threaten people's right to choose, to stop Thanos from killing half the life in the universe, and then to bring the Mad Titan down once and for all. Coming in at number 5, "That shield doesn't belong to you, you don't deserve it." This might be one of the most heartbreaking lines Tony has ever said to Steve. After their fight at the Siberian Hydra facility, a bloodied and beaten Tony Stark spits the line at Steve like venom. Steve looks back, drops the bloodstained shield, and walks away. And for 7 years, he sheds his title title and becomes Nomad instead. Well, we know he wasn't technically called Nomad, but we all felt the Nomad vibe the moment he stepped out of the shadows in Infinity War, right? Civil War changed his character significantly. His belief in the American government was broken, and this also ties back to his "put my trust in individuals" quote. After all, what's the use of putting on an iconic suit if the government's taking away your right to choose, right? Next is number 4, if you want to stand in our way, we'll fight you too. In Infinity War, Cap's got 99 problems, but standing up to bullies ain't one. Thunderbolt Ross is an intimidating character in the MCU. He's powerful, political, and always has an agenda up his sleeve. So when Steve confronts him in Infinity War at the Avengers facility, he tells him he won't hesitate to fight him if he gets in the way. We love how every writer and director in the Marvel Cinematic Universe knows who Steve Rogers is as a person. He's always going to take a stand against those who threaten the safety of people, whether it's Thanos, Tony with the Sokovia Accords, or Thunderbolt Ross. It's the one thing that always remained consistent about the character and inspired many characters to follow him into battle. Heading into the top 3 is the iconic "I can do this all day." We're picking this specifically because he says it to the person beating him up in the beginning of the first Captain America movie. Even though he's physically smaller, weaker, and less durable than the guy fighting him, he keeps getting up. He knows he'll lose, but he's got Rocky Balboa's grit and will go the distance in any fight. You see, that's another thing that makes him so special as a character. He doesn't care about winning or losing, he cares about standing up to bullies and fighting them with everything he's got. In Infinity War, Thanos walks up to him and tries grabbing him with his hand, but he pushes back. Thanos is genuinely shook that a human like Steve didn't just crumble, but stood up to him. He doesn't say the line, but you can see it in his eyes. He can do this all day. He ended up getting knocked out by the purple guy, but that's not the point, and you know it. In second place, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree. Look them in the eye and say, "No, you move." Civil War was the turning point in his character's journey, forcing him to make some of the most difficult decisions he's ever made. But that's where Sharon Carter's speech at Peggy's funeral comes in. The quote is actually a modified version of Captain America's original quote from the comics, but we love how they used it in the context of this scene. Steve doesn't always believe in his own convictions. He's conflicted about his choices just like the rest of us. He knows that the Sokovia Accords go against everything the Avengers stand for, but he also knows that they can be reckless and cause a lot of collateral damage. Sharon's speech changes that and gives him the confirmation he needs to stand up for what he believes in. And it's a quote that echoes throughout the rest of the movies too. Finally, number 1, stay who you are, not a perfect soldier, but a good man. Dr. Erskine had little screen time in the first Captain America movie, but he said one of the most important lines in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The only reason why Steve was chosen for the Super Soldier program was because of his good heart. He threw himself on top of a fake grenade to save everyone around him. He didn't give up fighting in the alleyway. He stood up to Red Skull, Bucky in the Winter Soldier, Tony in Civil War, and Thanos. Steve lost Bucky in the first Captain America movie, then Peggy in Civil War, and Natasha and Tony in Endgame. He's been through more war, loss, and grief than most people, and yet he remained a good man till the end of the line. And that's a wrap, folks. Thanks for watching. So what's your favorite Cap quote? Did we miss out on any that you think should be on this list? Tell us down below. And as always, if you'd like more Marvel content in your recommended list, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more. And we'll see you in the next one.